Year 6 and welcome to RE Day, where we are learning more about the religion of Judaism. In this lesson, we're going to be learning more about the symbolism of the Star of David that we see here. So first, let's start off by doing our knowledge quiz, where we review our previous knowledge. So please get your pen and paper out and write these answers in your book or on a piece of paper. Question number 1. Which religion uses the cross? Is it Christianity, Judaism, or Hinduism? Which religion uses the cross? Please pause this video now and write down your answer. Question 2. True or false? Jesus was resurrected on the Saturday. True or false? Question 3. How was Jesus sentenced to death? Via what method? Please pause this video now and write down your answer. Question 4. True or false? The Wailing Wall is also known as the Western Wall and is located in Jerusalem, Israel. I'll say it one more time. The Wailing Wall is also known as the Western Wall and is located in Jerusalem, Israel. True or false? Pause this video now and write down your answer. Question 5. Delete as appropriate. The Western Wall is where Jews often sit in. Jews often sit in this area meditating or celebrating, and visitors write songs or prayers and wedge the papers into cracks in the wall. So delete as appropriate. At the Western Wall, Jews often sit in this area meditating or celebrating, and visitors write songs or prayers and wedge the papers into cracks in the wall. Please pause this video now and write down your answers. Okay, let's go through the answers. The religion which uses the cross as a symbol is Christianity. Question 2. Jesus was resurrected on the Sunday, so that was false. Question 3. How was Jesus sentenced to death? He was sentenced to death via crucifixion, which is the nailing on the cross, and that is why the cross is the symbol of Christianity. And then reviewing knowledge from last year, true or false, the Wailing Wall is known as the Western Wall and is located in the city of Jerusalem in the country of Israel. That is true. Here is a picture of the Western Wall. Going back a picture, here is another picture of it in the city of Jerusalem in Israel. The Western Wall is where Jews often sit in this area meditating, and visitors write prayers and wedge the papers into cracks in the wall. So we see the cracks in the wall here. People are meditating, praying, and they're putting their prayers, which they've written on little pieces of paper, into these cracks in the wall. Now, this wall has 2 sections, one section for men and one section for women. And the section for women is much smaller than the section for men. Okay, question for you. Which religious symbols do you recognize here? Please pause this video and take a moment to have a look at these symbols and see which religious symbols you recognize. To name a few, here's the Christian symbol of the cross. This is the Muslim symbol of the moon and the star. And here is the Jewish menorah. And that is yin and yang. This is the Buddhist symbol. And here's another Buddhist symbol. And this is what we're studying today, which is the Star of David. These 2 triangles looped into each other. So, what is the significance of the Star of David? The Star of David, or the Magdan David, which means shield of David, is a symbol associated with the Jewish people. It is composed of 2 equilateral triangles, one pointing up and the other one pointing down. Now, we've just been learning about equilateral triangles in maths. Equilateral triangle means that all of the sides have the same length. And what do the symbols represent? The 2 triangles are meant to represent man and God. So God is the triangle pointing up to the sky, and man is the triangle pointing down, praying to God. Now remember this, because we're going to do an activity where you'll have to recall this knowledge. So King David, you might be wondering, who is King David and why does he have this important star symbolizing him? In Judaism, the star is known as the Magdan David, the shield of David. It represents how God watched over King David in 1000 before Christ during his reign. So that's 1000 years before Jesus Christ was born. King David brought in laws and justice at a time when people were running riot, and many revered him as a god. But the symbol represents how God was in fact a shield of King David and the Jewish people. King David's qualities were best demonstrated when he fought valiantly, means bravely, against Goliath. So here is David, and that is a giant Goliath. The people of Israel confronted their enemies inspired by David. He stunned Goliath with a stone from his sling. So here is David shooting Goliath with a stone in his sling. Hence David being the shield of Israel, like the star. So let's read about this story about David and Goliath. A very long time ago, there were two groups of people known as Philistines and the Israelites, and they didn't get along very well at all. The Philistines lived on one mountain and the Israelites lived on another mountain, and all they talked about was fighting each other. Now, say hello to Goliath. Imagine him, a man who is taller than any man you have ever seen before, taller than any man in the world, in fact, 9 feet tall. Imagine that. Then imagine how much he weighs, probably more than all of you put together, and then a bit more. And he's got brass on his legs for protection and a spear that's even taller than his. He's the biggest man you will ever see in your life, and he is on the Philistine side. Now listen to what he says to the Israelites. I am Goliath. Hello down there. You look very small, like tiny ants. Which of you tiny ants is going to fight me, eh? I bet none of you can beat me. None of the Israelites wanted to fight Goliath. Even their leader, King Saul, said, no thanks. So who was going to stand up to Goliath? Now, it just so happened that down the road, there was a man called Jesse who had 8 sons. Most of his sons were strong and brave and already in the army. But the youngest one, David, was much smaller. So he helped his father at home by looking after the sheep. There's David. One day, his father said to him, David, I need you to go and see your brave brothers in the army, but you must be very careful because you're not as brave as them. David knew he was just as brave, but he kept quiet, and the next morning he set off to see his brothers. Just as he had just arrived when, crash, bang, who was that? David looked up to see Goliath, who was shouting down at the Israelites again. Hello, tiny ants. Why have none of you tried to challenge me yet? Oh, come on and fight Goliath. Don't be scared. Everyone, including David's brothers, was very, very scared. But David wasn't scared at all. He said to everyone, yes, Goliath is big, but God is bigger, much, much bigger. I will challenge Goliath, and with God's help, I shall defeat him. Of course, everyone laughed at him when he said this. Little David fighting Goliath, what a silly idea. And they laughed even more when David went to tell King Saul about his plans. But David was determined and said to King Saul, I know I'm small, but I am very brave. Goliath is bigger than me, but that doesn't mean I shouldn't stand up to him. The king thought for a minute. Okay then, young David, he said, go ahead and challenge Goliath, but you must wear armor to protect yourself. No thanks, said David. All I need is my slingshot and 5 stones. And off David went. A slingshot and 5 stones? How could David beat Goliath with just that? Well, I'll tell you. First of all, David looks up at Goliath and says, Goliath, down here. Where? Here. Where? Here. Oh, there you are. Sorry, you're such a tiny ant. I couldn't see you. I may be small like an ant, said David, but I am brave. Now Goliath didn't much like being answered back, so he stopped laughing. What do you want, little ant? He asked. To challenge you, said David. Then Goliath started to laugh again, and laugh and laugh and laugh. Finally, when he stopped laughing, he said, now, why would you want to do that? Look at the size of me, and look at the size of you. But David just said again, I'm here to challenge you. And suddenly Goliath was running towards David. Boom, crash, running like a big, slow, angry elephant. What was David going to do? He would be crushed like an ant if he didn't move out of the way, but Goliath didn't need to move. Sorry, but David didn't need to move. He just picked up a slingshot and one of his 5 stones, and he slowly took aim. The stone flew through the air, whoosh, all the way up to Goliath. Wait for it. Thwack. Goliath started to tumble to the ground. Oh no, which way is he going to fall? He's falling one way, then another, then back again. Everyone out of the way. Bam! The whole ground shook as Goliath landed flat on his face, defeated by David and his slingshot and stone. Goliath, the big elephant, beaten by David, the tiny ant. So there is the story of David and Goliath, a metaphor for life. Shows you that being smart and clever and tactical can often be much more useful than being big. All right, for your first activity, I would like you to please write down this question. What is the symbolism of the Star of David? And draw the Star of David and annotate the star, identifying its importance to the Jewish people and using these key words. So I have modeled it here for you, starting off by writing the title. What is the symbolism of the Star of David? Underlining it with a ruler. And then I would like you to please draw out the Star of David. So as I'm drawing it, I am using a ruler to draw the straight lines. So I have one triangle pointing up. That's the one that it symbolizes God because it's pointing to the sky. And I did my little dots there before I drew the lines just to make it a bit easier to show where I was going. And there is the second equilateral triangle pointing down. If you really wanted to make sure it was perfectly shaped, you could measure each length to make sure they were all the same length, but it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. What's more important is the labeling part, annotating it. So this is also known as the Magen David, which means the shield of David. And using a ruler, I also need to annotate the 2 triangles, one pointing up, which symbolizes God pointing to the sky, and the one pointing down, which symbolizes man kneeling down and praying to God. So let's start with the first one. The triangle pointing up symbolizes God because it's pointing to the sky, and the triangle pointing down symbolizes man kneeling down and praying to God. I'm adding these little arrows just to make it really neat. And then finally, I'm going to add a paragraph explaining David brought justice and laws at a time when people were running riot. So that's all of my annotations for the Star of David, showing what it symbolizes. So please pause this video now and draw your very own star and annotate it like this. Okay, welcome back. Let's learn a bit more about where we can find the Star of David. Where is the Star of David seen? Well, one place is the flag of Israel, the country of Israel. The 6 points represent the 6 days of creation, because and the blue represents heaven and reminds us of God's ways, and the white represents purity and peace. We can also see the Star of David in synagogues. Now, remembering synagogues is a place of worship for Jewish people in the same way in which the church is a place of worship for Christians and the mosque is a place of worship for Muslims. It is found often at the entrance of synagogues. See, we see a door here for the entrance of a synagogue, and also near where the Torah is situated. The Torah is the holy book of the Jewish people. It's usually found in a scroll. Okay, now a question for you. Why do you think the Star of David is often found at the entrance of synagogues? Have a moment to think. Well, it's to show when you enter a place that you know you're in a synagogue, because it is the symbol of Judaism. And it's also found in jewelry. It's found in necklaces as a reminder that God protects you as Jewish people and acts as your shield. Essentially, God is close to your heart. Now, for our second activity, I would like you to please write a few sentences about the symbolism of the Star of David. So we have 3 places where we can often find the Star of David: in the flag of Israel, in synagogues, and in jewelry. And here are some potential sentence starters for you. Let me show you how I would like it done. I have modeled it here for you. So let's start with number 1, the flag of Israel. Please underline it neatly. And so I would like you to draw the flag of Israel. There you go. And you can, if you have coloring pens or pencils, you can draw them here. I'm using a ruler to keep it neat, drawing my dots there, and I'm coloring it in. But if you have blue coloring pencils, it could look even better than using a biro. Now, I'm using one of these sentence starters here. The 6 points represent, but you could also write about what the blue represents or what the white represents. Now, I am writing here, the 6 points of the star represent the 6 days of creation. Okay, now, number 2, synagogues is another place where the Star of David is found. So I write that subtitle and I draw a little diagram of an entrance to a synagogue, making it as neat as possible, and you can use coloring pencils if you have them. Drawing the door there and writing a paragraph using a sentence starter here. The Star of David is often seen in the entrance area of synagogues or near the Torah. Okay, then moving on to the 3rd place where the Star of David is often found, which is in jewelry. So I'm going to draw a necklace here and then write a sentence. The Star of David is often seen on necklaces as a reminder that God protects you and acts as your shield. So there you go. I'm really looking forward to seeing your drawings and your explanations of the symbolism of the Star of David and where you see them in the flag of Israel, in synagogues, and in jewelry. Well, Year 6, I hope you've enjoyed learning a bit more about the Star of David. Bye.